It was close to midnight. The only sound in the house was the ticking of an old wall clock in the kitchen and the low hum of the fridge. I had just turned off the TV and was about to head upstairs when I heard it. A sound that didn't belong to the woods at this hour. Not the cry of an owl. Not the rustling of wind. This was different. Low. Broken. Like something grieving. I froze. My hand still on the railing. Then it came again, closer this time. A deep, trembling moan that sent a chill through me. I grabbed the flashlight from the drawer and slowly walked to the front door. I knew I should have called someone, but my gut said no. Not yet. The porch light flickered as I opened the door. She was standing there, a massive brown bear, easily over 300 pounds. Her fur was matted with dirt and rain, but it wasn't her size that made me stumble back. It was her eyes, red, glistening, and filled with something I never thought I'd see in a wild animal. Grief. In her mouth, hanging limp, was a small cub. I could barely see its chest rising. Just barely. Like a candle about to die. Her jaw trembled slightly as she set it down on the porch, then looked at me. I don't know why I didn't run. Maybe it was the way she didn't growl. Maybe it was how her head dropped after placing the cub, like she was begging. I stood frozen, heart slamming in my chest. My flashlight dropped to the floor. We stared at each other. She didn't move. Then I did something I still can't explain. I crouched down. Slowly. Inches at a time. The cub's fur was soaked. Mud and blood mixed around its neck. I reached out, my hands shaking. I expected the mother to lash out, to tear my arm clean off. But she stayed still, watching. I touched the cub. It was cold, but there was warmth still deep inside. I pressed 2 fingers gently against its side. It was breathing. Barely. Jesus. I muttered, more to myself than to her. I looked up. She was still there. Her body hunched, not in attack, but in sorrow. Her shoulders rising and falling like she was trying not to collapse. I need to get him inside, I whispered. I didn't expect her to understand. But she tilted her head, just slightly. I grabbed the towel I kept by the door and carefully wrapped the cub. The moment I lifted him, she let out a soft exhale. A whimper. I backed into the house, step by step. My heart in my throat. She followed to the door, but stopped. Didn't try to come in. I closed it gently. Turned the deadbolt with trembling fingers. Inside, everything was spinning. My brain couldn't catch up. I laid the cub on the couch, turned on every light, grabbed my phone, and froze again. Who do you call when a dying wild animal is on your sofa? I stared at the screen. Animal control? Wildlife services? They'd euthanize him in a heartbeat. I glanced back. The cub let out a faint wheeze. I couldn't let that happen. I dropped the phone, grabbed the emergency kit from the bathroom, and started cleaning the wound. There was a deep gash under his left arm, probably from a fall or maybe another animal. No time to think. I warmed some towels in the microwave, gently wrapped him again. I remembered how I used to care for my son when he was sick. Tender, slow, every movement full of hope and fear. I looked out the window. The mother was still there, sitting, watching the house like it held her entire world inside. And maybe it did. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor beside the couch, holding a tiny paw in my hand. And I whispered a promise. I'll try. The towel I used to wrap the cub was already soaked by the time I carried him into the bathroom. My hands were trembling so badly, I nearly dropped him getting through the door. The bear's head lolled to the side, his breath barely there. Still alive, but fading. I laid him gently in the bathtub. The porcelain felt ice cold, so I grabbed more towels and layered them underneath. Then I turned on the tap and let lukewarm water run into a bowl. Every move I made felt clumsy, uncertain. This wasn't a dog or a cat. This was a wild animal. But when I looked at him, barely the size of a large puppy, none of that mattered. He whimpered once. A short, desperate sound. It hit me straight in the gut. I knelt beside the tub and began cleaning around the wound with warm water and cotton. Blood mixed with mud in thick swirls, staining the towel's deep brown. There was a gash just under his left shoulder. Deep, but not gushing. Maybe a bite. Maybe a sharp rock. I didn't know. I needed help. I grabbed my phone again and started calling. The first vet clinic was closed. The second picked up but hung up the moment I mentioned it was a bear. The third told me they weren't authorized to treat wildlife and gave me the number for fish and wildlife. I didn't even bother calling them. I stared at the cub. His tiny chest rose and felt like it was costing him everything just to stay alive. I sat down on the cold tile and ran both hands over my face. Then I did what desperate people do. I Googled how to stabilize a bear cub, bear cub emergency care, how to help an injured wild animal. The answers were vague, clinical, or terrifying. Most recommended leaving the animal where it was and calling professionals. One article talked about sedatives. Another warned that even a small cub could bite your hand off. I looked over at the sink. My hand was still shaking. I hadn't noticed until that moment how scared I was. Outside, through the window, I saw her. Still there. The mother, sitting under the porch light, unmoving. Watching the house like she had placed her soul inside and was waiting to get it back. "I'm trying," I whispered. I got back to work. I cleaned the wound again, dabbed some antiseptic around the edges. The cub didn't flinch. He barely moved at all. That scared me more than anything. Then I remembered something. When my son Nathan was 6, he caught a fever so bad we had to put him on 4 fluids at home for a day until the clinic had space. I still had the old drip kit in the basement. It was supposed to be disposed of, but I never did. For some reason, I ran down the steps like a madman, tore open boxes until I found it, still sealed, still intact. The saline bag was expired, but only by a year. I had no idea if it would help, but it was something. Back in the bathroom, I used a shoelace to gently tie off the cub's leg. Found the vein, inserted the needle. My hands remembered the motion even if my mind didn't believe it. A slow drip started. I sat back, exhausted. It had been over an hour since she arrived, and she was still outside. I took a bowl, filled it with warm water, and dipped a clean cloth into it. I began gently wiping the cub's face, his paws. His eyes fluttered for a second. His ears twitched. "Come on, buddy," I said softly. "Stay with me." That's when the memory hit me. Nathan, wrapped in a blanket on the couch, pale and sweating. The look in his eyes. That same fight to stay. And the same silence after he didn't. I squeezed the cub's paw. Not again. Not this time. I don't know how long I sat there. Minutes. Hours maybe. But sometime near dawn, the cub stirred. His legs shifted slightly. His breathing, still ragged, got a little stronger. I looked out the window. The mother bear was gone. For the first time all night, I wasn't sure if that made things better or worse. By the time the sun rose, I was sitting on the bathroom floor, stiff and exhausted. The cub was still wrapped in warm towels, the 4-bag nearly empty now. He was breathing more steadily, though still shallow. A few times during the night, he stirred. Weak twitches, tiny whimpers. But he was still here, still fighting. I heard the knock just after 7. Not a polite knock. The kind of knock that makes your gut twist. 3 sharp bangs. I opened the door and came face to face with a uniformed ranger. Late 30s, crew cut, eyes scanning everything before they even met mine. "You Mark Dalton?" I nodded. He didn't wait to be invited in. "We got a call," he said, stepping inside. "Someone from the station saw a bear on your porch last night. Said it looked like it was dropping something off. You want to explain what the hell's going on here?" I swallowed hard, closed the door behind him. My mind was a blur, but I wasn't about to lie. "It's a cub," I said. "She brought it to me. He's hurt. Badly. I'm trying to keep him alive." He stopped mid-step, turned back. "You're keeping a wild bear cub in your house?" "I'm keeping a dying cub from giving up." "That's illegal," he snapped. "You're not licensed for wildlife rehab. That animal needs to be surrendered immediately." I took a breath. My throat felt like sandpaper. If I surrender him now, he dies. I've been up all night keeping him breathing. He wouldn't have made it without help. The ranger stepped in closer. His voice dropped. "This isn't up to you. There are rules. If you really cared, you'd call it in. There are procedures." I nearly laughed. The kind of dry, bitter laugh that comes from being too tired to cry. "I did call," I said. 3 clinics. No one would help. You think Fish and Wildlife would have rushed over with a rescue team? They would have put a bullet in his head before asking questions. His jaw clenched. "You don't know that." "Yes, I do. Because I lost a son 4 years ago, and I've seen what helpless looks like. I know what it means to fight for someone who can't speak, who can't ask, who just needs someone to give a damn." Silence. Then he pulled out his radio. "I'm calling it in." I stepped between him and the door. "Don't." He looked stunned. Maybe because I didn't shout. Maybe because my voice shook. "Please, just give me a day. 1 day. If he gets worse, I'll call. I swear. But if you take him now, there's no chance." He hesitated, then said the words that pushed everything over the edge. "You could be arrested for this. Fined. Charged with interference in wildlife management." I stepped back, my hands clenched into fists. "Then do it. Call whoever you want. But you'll have to take me too, because I'm not handing him over. I already buried my child once. I'm not burying another one. Not like this." The room went quiet. He stared at me for what felt like forever. Then he lowered the radio. "You've got 24 hours, he muttered. "Then I come back. And if you haven't turned him in, I make the call." He left without another word. I stood there, heart pounding. I hadn't raised my voice, but it felt like I'd just screamed at the world. A few minutes later, I called a local vet I knew from years back. Sarah. She didn't treat wild animals either, but I hoped. She picked up. "Sarah, it's Mark. I need help. And I know it's a lot, but I'm not asking for rules. I'm asking for mercy." She was silent a long time. Then, "Where are you?" I gave her the address. She said, "I'll be there in an hour. But if anyone finds out I helped you, I could lose my license. Then I'll lie for you, like I always have." We both chuckled. Barely. I went back into the bathroom. The cub was breathing, eyes still closed, but his chest rose and fell with a rhythm that gave me something to hold on to. I sat beside him, and for the first time in a long, long time, I prayed. The decision came around 9 that night. I sat in the kitchen with the lights off, watching the cub breathe on a pile of blankets I'd moved to the living room. Sarah had left just 2 hours earlier, doing what she could with what little we had. She'd cleaned the wound properly, left me a few supplies, and said, quietly, that the next 48 hours were critical. But I didn't have 48 hours. The ranger would be back in the morning. So I made a decision I never thought I'd have to make again. I packed to run. I filled a duffel with blankets, water bottles, syringes, antiseptic, and everything Sarah left behind. I bundled the cub into a soft carrier meant for a medium dog, patting it with towels warmed in the dryer. He whimpered when I moved him, but he didn't resist. I stepped out onto the porch. She was there, the mother bear. She stood in the trees, maybe 30 feet from the house. Not hiding, not approaching, just waiting. I met her eyes. "I'm taking him somewhere safe. You can come, or not. I won't stop you." I loaded the carrier into the back seat and started the truck. My old pickup rumbled like it hated the cold night. I pulled out of the driveway, glanced in the mirror. She followed. At first, just along the edge of the trees, then onto the dirt road behind me. I drove slow, real slow, 15 miles an hour tops. Every so often I'd see her silhouette in the mirror, massive, deliberate, silent. We hit the main road after 20 minutes. That's when things got tricky. There were streetlights and cars and people. At a gas station on the outskirts of town, I pulled in to top off the tank. I kept the engine running. Didn't go inside. Just cart in, pump and go. But it was enough time. A woman parked 2 spots away stepped out of her car and stared into the trees. "Is that a bear?" I didn't look. I just finished pumping, replaced the cap, and muttered, "Don't be," under my breath. I jumped into the truck and pulled away before she could do more than fumble for her phone. A few miles later, red and blue lights flared up behind me. Panic hit hard. I pulled off into a gravel turnout and cut the engine. The officer approached. Young, nervous. "Sir, we got a report of a bear sighting. You see anything unusual on the road tonight?" "Yeah," I said straight-faced. "A deer about half an hour back. Almost clipped it." He shined his flashlight into the truck bed, then the back seat. The cub was covered in a thick blanket, barely visible. "You transporting animals tonight?" I hesitated. "Just driving to see a friend." He narrowed his eyes but didn't push it. After a tense pause, he waved me off. "Be careful. There've been a few sightings this week. If you see anything, call it in." "Will do." I pulled away, heart pounding. We drove another hour into the hills. The roads turned narrow and broken. I hadn't been to this cabin in years. Last time was a fishing trip with Tom, the old vet who'd retired up here after his wife passed. No phone service. No neighbors for miles. Perfect. I finally rolled into the overgrown gravel driveway just past midnight. I parked behind the cabin. The place looked smaller than I remembered, but it had what we needed: shelter, warmth, and silence. I opened the door. Dust and musty wood filled the air. I turned on the generator and got to work. I laid the cub on a thick quilt near the fire I quickly built. Checked his temperature. Still low, but better than yesterday. Cleaned the wound again. Gave him a little glucose with a syringe. When I finally opened the cabin door again, the bear was there. She hadn't left us once. She didn't come inside. Just sat on the edge of the clearing, her massive frame catching the flicker of firelight from within. I stared at her. No words. just a silent understanding. We'd made it. For now. The morning light seeped in through the dusty window panes, cutting across the wooden floor in long golden lines. The cub stirred beside the fire, his breathing now deep and steady. For 3 days, we had kept to ourselves in that mountain cabin. No news, no calls, no knocks at the door. Just the quiet rhythm of survival. On the 4th morning, something changed. I was chopping wood outside when I heard a rustle near the porch. I turned just in time to see the cub standing. Wobbly, but on his feet. His legs trembled, but he took a few shaky steps toward the doorway. His head swayed, his nose twitching at the fresh air. I dropped the axe and rushed to him. He blinked up at me, dazed but aware. "Hey there," I said softly. "You came back." He let out the tiniest sound, somewhere between a sigh and a squeak, and nudged his head against my hand. I stood frozen, not from fear, but from something else entirely. That quiet, aching joy that rises up when you realize hope wasn't foolish after all. Later that afternoon, I sat on the porch with a cup of instant coffee, watching the clearing. She emerged slowly from the trees, cautious but calm. Her massive frame moved like smoke, silent, deliberate. The cub spotted her and gave the weakest, clumsiest bound toward her. I held my breath. She met him halfway, lowered her head, touched her nose to his. There was no sound, no growl, no roar, just that moment, pure and unshakable. They stood together for a while. Then she looked at me, not with fear, not with threat, but something older, something deeper, recognition maybe. And then they turned, together, and walked slowly back into the woods. I didn't follow. I didn't call out. I just sat there and watched them disappear into the trees. A week passed. I cleaned the cabin, restocked what I could, and finally made the trip back home. My place looked the same as I left it. Quiet, still, empty, except I wasn't the same. The next few days were uneventful. I went back to chopping wood, fixing the leaky pipe in the bathroom, and pretending life hadn't changed. But at night, the silence pressed harder. Then, one night, I heard it again. The soft thump on the porch. The same sound that started all of this. I opened the door slowly. She was there, alone. No cub, no sound, just standing there in the moonlight. Her coat glowed faintly silver. Her eyes, steady and unreadable. In her mouth, she held something. She stepped forward and placed it on the wooden boards. A pine branch. Long, fresh, still smelling of sap. She placed it down gently, then backed away. She looked at me once more. One last look. Then she turned and vanished into the trees. I didn't move for a long time. The pine branch stayed on the porch until the wind took it weeks later. I never brought it inside. Never needed to. I still think about that night. About what that meant. That silent gift. I saved her cub, but she saved something in me too. People ask if I ever saw them again. I didn't. Not once. But sometimes, when the wind shifts through the trees just right, I swear I hear soft footsteps in the woods. Heavy. Familiar. And every time, I whisper the same thing. Thank you. And I still don't know who saved who.